Let's get one thing very clear from the start. I love Korg instruments. I have done since the MS-20 through to the M1, and recently they have released some really interesting and actually some excellent products. I also, over the years, have liked the company, but something has happened which has made me question that. So I'm not going to have a go at Korg Instruments, I'm going to have a bit of a go at the Korg design team, I'm going to have a bit of a bigger go at their marketing department, and oh boy yes, am I going to have a go at Korg pricing. Now if you think Korg Instruments are good value for money, if you think they are fairly priced or even reasonably priced or perhaps just a little bit expensive, but it's Korg, so it's worth it. If you fall into any of those categories, you are probably not going to like this video. So I would suggest you switch off now and go and watch some reality TV. But for everyone else, I shall explain in full and tell you exactly what I'm talking about. Now, this whole business, this video, this question was prompted by Korg's announcement, Korg's actual release of the Op6 SE. I discussed this in some detail with my good friend Matt Wright, who also has a YouTube channel. I shall link to his video in the description. See what he has to say about it and read the comments that viewers have left in the comments section. So if Korg's Wavestate and Op6 and the SE release, if all this is history to you, you might want to skip to this point in the timeline. If you're a bit fuzzy about all this, I shall explain as quickly as I can and give you the background to this video, essentially. So in early 2020, Korg released the Wavestate. This was a digital synthesizer with wave sequencing, and I don't think anyone had heard anything quite like it. It produced incredibly impressive sounds, so much so that I went out and bought one. A year later, Korg released the Op6, which they call an altered FM synthesizer. This attracted a great deal of interest. I think it's the 40th year anniversary of the release of Yamaha's DX7, which introduced the world to FM synthesis, and it's never been the same since. So FM synthesis is great, but it is so unfathomable, and back in the day particularly, nobody could understand it or program it, because all you had then was a very small LCD display and a data slider. Very unfriendly. So it's only taken about 40 years for someone to come up with an actual user-friendly version of FM, and that was Korg in their Op6. The original DX7 only used sine waves. The Op6 has additional waveforms, it has more algorithms, and crucially, it has sliders and hands-on controls, so you can actually get a feel for what's going on inside. So the Op6, brilliant synthesizer. Then 6 months after that, Korg released the Modwave. This was another digital synth, very interesting. So a lot of people, including myself, are a bit fuzzy about the differences between the Modwave and the Wavestate. There are lots of forum posts and YouTube videos which explain the difference. I'm not going to link to any, that's not the purpose of this video, but if you want to know the difference, the information is out there. So there were 3 new instruments from Korg over the last few years. Very interesting, very powerful, some fantastic sounds. As you can see, they all share a very similar format. They are all housed in the same plastic case. They all have 37 plastic keys. The only difference is the controls on top and of course the digital synth inside, more of which in a moment. Now although the keys are playable and they are full size, the keybed is one of the absolute worst in the history of synthesizers, in my opinion. They are cheap and plasticky. They were certainly built down to the price and certainly not up to any sort of quality. And this is one area where I think Korg certainly let themselves down, because there's no way you could apply the word quality to these keys. Now, I haven't checked the prices for a while. I assumed they would all be about the same price, but having checked the prices now, they are not. For some reason, Korg decided to slightly upgrade the Wavestate. They give it more polyphony. Great. And a different paint job. And as we all know, if you want to buy a synth as soon as it is released, you will pay top dollar. So at the moment in the UK, it is 700 Great British pounds. or to be more precise, $699, because we know $699 is so much cheaper than £700. Now, when I bought my Wavestate a couple of years ago, it cost me £558. Now, at the time, I thought that was at the high end of reasonable. £700, they're really starting to get out of the ballpark for a few reasons, which I'll get to in a moment. Now, they have not similarly released a Mark II version of the Op6, and you can get that for around £420. Now, at that price, the Op6 and the other two, if they were all the same price, at around £420, that would be, I think, a good deal, a very fair price. We are perhaps seeing a reduction in the price of the Op6 because of the release of the Op6 SE. Now, I know I haven't got to that yet, but bear with me. Now, I have to say, I thought all these instruments were selling for around £550, and the Mod Wave at the moment is around £550. So whether these price differences are due to market forces or Korg just trying to get rid of one type of product rather than another, who knows? So with these three physical synths on the market, Korg released plug-in versions, software native versions as it calls them. Now, I think these cost around $200, not an insignificant amount for a piece of software, in my opinion. But here's a tip: never pay full price for a piece of software. Because every piece of software, with very few exceptions, every piece will at some point come on sale. Not just during Black Friday. There are sales all the time. New Year's sales, summer sales, spring sales, winter sales, Christmas sales. They will all be reduced significantly during the year. So never pay full price. So at $200 for a software version of one of these synthesizers, is that a good deal? Well, if you pay twice as much, you can get the full thing with hands-on controls. And a big feature of these instruments is that you do get hands-on control, particularly with the Op6, but also with the other two. It is easy, or easier, to twiddle the controls, and it's more fun and intuitive to twiddle the controls with your fingers than it is to click a mouse around the screen. So if you can buy an Op6 for £420, paying $200 for the piece of software, I think is extortionate. You can get it during a sale for $100, which is a little bit better, but now if you do have the hardware, Korg will, I believe, graciously sell you the plug-in version for around $50, £50, something like that. Now, if you think this is a bit strange, why did Korg release the hardware and then the software? Well, I think these are all sort of marketing decisions. Now, if you look inside any of these, you will find something very interesting. They all run on, I believe it's a Raspberry Pi, Arduinos. These are little computer systems, essentially made for computer enthusiasts to write their own software. Now, they are as cheap as chips, $20, $30, $40 for a little computer. And these synthesizers run on these little self-contained computers, so it can't have been too difficult a job to port the system from the Raspberry Pi or whatever to the PC or the Mac as a VST. So in essence, these are really software synthesizers along with a set of dedicated hardware controls. Now, if you're wondering why Korg didn't release the plugins first, it could be because, well, Korg is primarily known as a hardware synth manufacturer, and if they'd released software, it would just have been one other software plugin in a field, in a sea of thousands of others. But by giving this piece of software dedicated controls, it really took the instrument up a level. So at this point, I think we are bang up to date history-wise, so we can welcome back anyone who decided to skip to this point in the video. So what about the SE keyboards? Well, a year and a half, maybe even 2 years ago, we were teased by a full keyboard-sized version of the Op6. Now, I know the industry has been plagued with problems, the whole world has been plagued with problems over the last few years, and people thought that the SE version was never going to arrive, but arrive it did, and it was announced a couple of weeks ago, and this has led to this video. So Korg released a Wavestate SE and an Op6 SE. Whether or not we will see a Mod Wave SE remains to be seen. But the Wavestate and the OP6 versions are very similar, so if there is a mod wave version, I suspect it will follow along similar lines. So the SEs, there's the Wavetable SE and the OP6 SE, and here they are. And again, you can see the similarity between the two designs. Now they both have an aluminium case. I believe some of the controls, some of the knobs are metallic. The big attraction is the keyboard, 5 octaves of premium keys with aftertouch, made in Japan. So significantly better than the plastic keys on the original Wavestate and OP6. But look at the design. All they have done is to take the controls from the original OP6 and dump it in the middle of this keyboard. I do believe they have increased the polyphony as well. 32-note polyphony on the original OP6. Is that not enough for anyone? We revelled over synthesizers with 5 and 6-note polyphony, and instead we still do. So the OP6 is 32-note polyphonic. The OP6 SE is 80-note polyphonic. How many fingers have you got? You're going to have to play a lot of sequences and stack a lot of notes up on top of each other to make use of that many notes. Anyway, more is always better, right? But really, for a premium instrument, which they are promoting and selling this at, price coming up in just a minute, it's almost unbelievable. Now, the original models had this tiny LCD. It was a reasonable screen for a budget-priced synthesizer. But look at the amount of real estate you have on these things, and you're still stuck with this tiny display. Now, it would not perhaps be so bad if there was not so much menu diving. But remember, these are soft synths, and soft synths have a lot more controls than hardware synths. So sticking with this small screen on this so-called premium instrument feels to me a bit like penny pinching. What they could have done, and what I think many people think they really should have done, was to use this amount of real estate to put more controls on the instrument, so you didn't have to step through quite so many menus. So more controls could be used for only one thing without having to be used in conjunction with buttons as well. There is so much more they could have done with this amount of real estate. But they didn't. They just dumped the old controls in the middle of the keyboard and said, there you are. So the big feature, of course, is this 5-octave keyboard made in Japan. It looks, and by all accounts, it is premium quality. Not only the keys and the keybed, but it also supports aftertouch. Oh, and they have tweaked the presets to respond to aftertouch. So let's finally get to the price if you don't know what it is already. Now, I'm not 100% sure what it is in America. I've tried looking up the prices on Sweetwater and Zounds, but they aren't currently listing the SE models. They do, however, seem to be available in the UK. And in the UK, the SE models are £1,899. 1,900 quid. Now, Korg is also releasing limited editions. Korg do like their limited editions. Limited editions, platinum versions of the SE instruments. Now, these are essentially the same as the standard version, although someone has been given a 50p can of platinum spray paint, and they have sprayed the chassis platinum. And that is another £200. So in the UK, we are currently looking at £1,900 for the standard version, £2,100 for the platinum version. Let's just round the two together and say around £2,000. Now for that, you also get a flight case. Isn't that wonderful? Well, if you gig with this instrument, yes, it is absolutely wonderful. But how many people are actually going to gig with the OP6 SE or the Wavestate SE? Now, I do remember reading a report. It was many years ago, so things may have changed slightly, but I tend to doubt it, that most instruments, most synthesizers, are sold to hobbyists, to home users, to people who have their own studio, not necessarily gigging musicians. So if we said that maybe 10%, or let's be very generous, 20% even, of people who are going to buy an OP6 are going to gig with it, that means the majority of people are being forced to buy and pay for a flight case which they don't want and they don't need. It's going to end up in the loft or in the garage. Now, make it optional, by all means, that would be a brilliant move. But making it compulsory, Well, that's just a marketing ploy to make you think that you're getting more for your money. But a good flight case made specifically for a particular instrument, alone that's probably going to cost around 200 quid. It wouldn't cost Korg that much to manufacture, but the marketing department can say, you're getting a flight case, isn't that good value? Well, yes it is, but only if you need it. So taking this all together, given that the inside is based on a $50 computer system, off-the-shelf computer system, it doesn't really have any dedicated chips or bits that Korg has worked on and manufactured. It's essentially a soft synth with dedicated controls. It just seems to me to be really difficult to justify the £2,000 price point. You of course have to make up your own mind about that. I'm just putting forward my point of view. Now, having said that, it is not just my point of view. Now, at the time of making this video, I've actually seen 2 reviews of the SE. Neither of them mention price at all. Now, that itself, I think, is telling. Now, you might think, is it a reviewer's job to mention price? Well, I've been on the other side of the fence. I reviewed music hardware and software for 25 years. And yes, it absolutely is a reviewer's job to mention price. Whether they say it's cheap, good value for money, of course, the instrument companies would want them to say that, or whether they say, this is vastly overpriced. This is, buy it if you wanted, but wow, But I think a reviewer who looks at a piece of equipment without mentioning price in some way, shape or form is not really doing the full job. If you want to know what a piece of gear does, then go look at a tutorial. I like a reviewer to give an opinion about the entire instrument, including price. So the fact that these 2 reviews didn't mention price at all, I thought that was interesting. And apart from those 2 videos, there are a lot more just discussing the SE and its price and its design. And I have to say, not one of them is complimentary. I guess I'm just adding this video to the list. In a recent Sonic State podcast, which included Starsky Car and a Thai Unwin, I'll link to that in the description if you want to check that out as well. But they were basically reflecting on the price, and Ty suggested that this was just so high no one would buy it. Obviously people will buy it, but he predicted that in 12 months' time the price would come down to around £1,200 or $1,200. I'm not sure if it would ever drop that low, but it would certainly be a more realistic price given what has gone into it, in Ty's opinion and in mine. But I want to ask a slightly bigger question, and that is, what the heck is going on with Korg? Now, I've always liked Korg as a company. Back in the day I used to be representatives. Now, most of the people I used to meet back then, they were musicians, were part of the sales and marketing team, but the majority of them were musicians. So we, all musicians together, we have a good talk about what was happening, what was going on in the industry. Now, that just seems to have disappeared somehow over the last few years. And I'm just wondering, is Korg becoming more corporate with an eye more to profit than to synthesizers? Now, of course, that is their right. As a company, they can produce and manufacture whatever they like. They can sell it or attempt to sell it for whatever price they like. Now, I've said this in some other videos, but we may love synth manufacturers, but they are not our friends. Sad to say, but they are in the business of making money. But I just wonder if Korg is moving into this area of corporateness, shall we say, where when coming up with a price, they think, how much can we get away with charging? And that really seems to be the case in this instance with the SC releases. But let me go back even further to where I think this started. Now, this may go back further, but I really became aware of it when Korg released the ARP 2600. This was around 2020, I think. I remember reading the review in Sound on Sound. Now, I have always wanted an ARP 2600. It's one of those synths which you sort of grew up lusting after, but could never quite afford. So I was reading the review of Korg's 2600, and I think I'm going to buy one of these. I am going to buy one. And I was wondering how much it was going to cost. £2,000, maybe £2,500. Yes, I'll pay £2,500 for this. Not miles out, not even in the same ballpark. In the UK, I think it was priced around £3,600. I'm not totally sure. In America, it was really pushing close to $4,000. I just really didn't think that was worth it. I didn't think it was value for money. This is another example of Korg producing a limited edition. If you have a bestseller, which this was absolutely going to be a bestseller, why would you only produce a limited number? Why only, I think it was 500? Why not 1,000 or 2,000? Make it worth your while. Make more money even. And make a lot more people happy. As it was, the 500 or whatever sold out pretty quickly and just appeared on the second-hand market at grossly inflated prices. So it wasn't being sold to synth enthusiasts who really wanted it and who would use it. It was being sold to people who just wanted to turn it around, make a fast buck and resell it. And this is also a case where the instrument came with its own flight case. A flight case for a modular synthesizer. Now, I know it has become a thing, particularly in recent years, to hold modular synth fests and people take their gear along and perform live with it. Super idea. But this wasn't quite so developed back then, and we're still talking about hobbyists rather than professional musicians. How many professional musicians are actually going to gig with one of these? I would hazard to guess a very small number, maybe 5% if you're lucky. It's a big modular instrument. It's a piece of studio equipment. It's not really the sort of instrument you want to gig with. But now Korg forces you to buy a flat case for the thing, which is going to end up in the loft or the garage. Although actually it was a good selling point for those people who actually bought one to resell, brand new, still in flight case. So that was the first example. So this was the 2600 FS full size. A short while later they released the 2600M, which was a modular version. Now just before that came out, Behringer had released their own 2600. Now I have one over there. Korg's is much better looking, but it is 2.5 times the price of the Behringer. Now, given the fact that the Behringer was already on the market, you might think it was a bit of a strange or brave move for Korg to come in with, I think it was around £1,300, I can't quite remember, to come in at that price point. They just totally ignored the competition. I think they were banking on the fact that this looked a little bit better and the fact that many people still do not like Behringer, so they wouldn't buy it. And I have to admit that the Korg module is much better looking than the Behringer. But for 2.5 times the price for similar functionality, I don't think so. I don't think that's good value. Just my opinion, of course, because I know many people have bought the Korg 2600 module. And for my third exhibit, may I present the new Korg MS-20 full size. This was released a couple of years ago. Now, I have always wanted an MS-20 ever since it was released in 1978, but like many people, I couldn't afford it. So when Korg re-released the MS-20 full size a couple of years ago, in 4 different colours no less, I was really excited until I saw the price. Now, I can't remember exactly how much it was on release. I think it was round about £1,000. I've just checked prices in UK stores now, and it is around £1,100. That is more than a Moog grandmother. Desirable though this is, I just don't think it's worth it. I think somewhere around 750 may be more reasonable. Although if you compare this to the price of some other monophonic synths mentioned in no names, it is an absolute veritable bargain. But for what it is, I think it's overpriced. It's just not good value. So all these things coming year after year after year just made me wonder what on earth is happening to Korg. You may have realised if you look at the industry side of the business that a lot of companies are being bought and merged and taken over and that sort of thing. Moog has been bought by In Music, Sequential as part of the Focusrite brand. Native Instruments has brought some of the software companies under their global umbrella. Now, this might be good for business, but it's generally not very good for competition, and this sort of thing is actually not always good for the company or the brand. We will have to wait and see. But Korg, as far as I know, hasn't been taken over by anyone. I just wonder if they're really trying to squeeze as much money out of the consumer as they possibly can. What do you think? Are you going to buy one of these SE instruments? Do you think they are good value for money? Will you buy one even if you think they are vastly overpriced because they are so good and so cool? So, as I mentioned, this is just one more video complaining about Korg's new SE, about the design, about the marketing, about the flight case, and about the price. So it would be good to know what you think about Korg in particular, of course, but also the more general trend which we may seem to be seeing about a more corporate approach to synthesizer manufacture and production. So I hope you enjoyed this video in some way and found it interesting, thought-provoking. As always, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. And if you have enjoyed this video but are not yet a subscriber, there's a button down there with subscribe on it. If you want to click that, that would be super stuff. And click the big thumb as well, because that really helps if you have enjoyed the video. And if you have enjoyed this one, I think you might actually enjoy one or two of these. Thanks for watching. I will see you again in the next one.